Right now, as you listen to these words, there's a weapons system aimed directly at the largest U.S. airbase in Europe. This isn't speculation. This isn't a drill. It's the operational reality that NATO generals deal with every single day. A base that coordinates 100% of Allied air operations in Europe. The clock starts ticking the moment a Russian commander gives the order in Kaliningrad. 3, 2, 1. The Iskander M rises from its launcher. The engines ignite. The warhead already knows where it's going. 200 seconds later, Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the nerve center of all NATO air operations, could be up in flames. That's 200 seconds. Shorter than it takes you to listen to this intro. At Ramstein, those 200 seconds have to cover everything. Detect the launch, calculate the trajectory, issue defense orders, arm Patriot batteries, and intercept a missile moving at speeds and pulling maneuvers that NATO's most sophisticated defense system simply wasn't built to handle. That's not enough time. And it's not an accident. It's by design. And what this means for Western defense will reshape everything you think you know about European security. The question this video answers isn't whether American bases in Europe are at risk. They are. The real question is far darker. Is there anything capable of stopping what's already pointed right at them? Here's what NATO's military planners quietly acknowledge. The Iskander M isn't a problem money will fix tomorrow. It's an architectural mismatch. A threat that exists right now versus a defense system built for a completely different war. In this video, you're going to understand exactly why the Patriot fails, why Aegis fails, what indefensible actually means in military doctrine, not just in headlines, why Russia engineered this problem at a cost that'll force NATO to spend tens of billions countering it, and what the Russian doctrine called escalate to de-escalate reveals about when and how this weapon gets used. The 200-second countdown is not hypothetical. It is the baseline planning parameter that Russian analysts use when modeling strikes against alliance facilities. Let's start with the weapon itself. Most people who hear Iskander M picture a short-range ballistic missile, a modernized version of the kind of weapon the world saw in the Persian Gulf during the 90s. Fast, destructive, but ultimately interceptable. A known threat with a known response. That image is wrong in almost every way that matters. The Iskander M, officially, the 9K720, isn't just a missile, it's an entire system. Each TL, Transporter Erector Launcher, carries 2 missiles, drives down regular highways, rolls into position, raises its payload, and fires in about 16 minutes from the approach march. No fixed infrastructure, no silo, no permanent target to hit. The whole system is built on mobility, and mobility is its greatest weapon. The trajectory is what separates the Iskander from everything the Patriot was trained to defeat. A conventional ballistic missile arcs up and arcs down. Its path is predictable. The Patriot radar calculates the trajectory. Intercept launched on a collision course. Terminal phase comes. Interception happens. That worked against Scuds. It assumes the missile follows a path you can predict well enough to block. The Iskander M doesn't follow that playbook. It uses a quasi-ballistic trajectory. Initial boost looks normal, but mid-course, the missile executes evasive maneuvers, corrects course, changes angle. Then comes the terminal phase, those final seconds before impact, when the Iskander pulls maneuvers of 20 to 30 Gs. Lateral accelerations that far exceed what the Patriot PAC-3 interceptor can respond to. For perspective, fighter pilots black out between 9 and 12 Gs. The Iskander pulls over 30 Gs in its terminal phase. That's not a marginal edge. That's a complete departure from everything the Patriot was designed to intercept. Precision is the second shock. The CEP circular error, probable, The radius where 50% of warheads land is 2 to 5 meters. That's 2 to 5 meters. This isn't an area weapon. It's not designed to level a neighborhood and hope a target's inside the blast zone. The Iskander M targets specific buildings inside a base. Operations rooms, specific hangars, communications hubs, exact coordinates. With a 2-meter CEP, you're not attacking a base. You're attacking a single room inside a building on that base. The variety of warheads it carries amplifies exactly what this level of precision can achieve. The system can be armed with high explosive fragmentation for exposed targets, thermobaric warheads for shallow underground facilities, bunker busters for hardened military structures, which penetrate deep before detonating, EMP warheads to cripple electronic systems without physical destruction, and nuclear payloads with estimated yields ranging from 10 to 50 kilotons. Each type of warhead exists because the system was designed to cover a full spectrum of targets. Surface installations, underground bunkers, electronic grids, high-value assets. A single Iskander brigade can strike all of these target types in the exact same operation. The Iskander K variant, which uses the same TL launcher, replaces the ballistic missile with cruise missiles. From the outside, the launcher looks identical. However, the trajectory and radar signature are completely different. A single brigade can launch both types, forcing any air defense system to deal with two radically different attack profiles coming from the exact same vehicles. The Iskander's design traces back to the 1987 INF Treaty. When the USSR agreed to destroy the OTR-23 OKA, Soviet engineers got to work on a successor. It technically stayed within treaty limits, 500 kilometers declared range, but with capabilities Western systems simply couldn't handle. The treaty collapsed in 2019. Range limits disappeared. Classified estimates suggest variants with ranges up to 700 kilometers. Terminal phase guidance uses active radar plus an optical system. GPS jamming won't stop it. The system entered Russian service in 2006 and hasn't stopped upgrading since. And since 2022, it's not hypothetical anymore. It's a weapon with real combat data backing it up. But no matter how sophisticated a weapon is, it's only a threat if it can reach its target. And this is where geography changes everything you've just learned. Now let's talk geography, because you need to see exactly where these systems are positioned. Kaliningrad isn't conventional Russian territory, it's an exclave. 15,000 square kilometers of Russia, wedged between Poland, south, and Lithuania, north, completely cut off by land from the rest of Russia, entirely surrounded by NATO members. Alliance military planners call it the unsinkable aircraft carrier. Why? Kaliningrad doesn't depend on long-distance logistics. It doesn't need resupply through contested routes. It's a permanent power projection hub less than 400 kilometers from Warsaw, under 300 kilometers from Tallinn, and within striking range of nearly all of NATO's eastern flank. Since 2013, Russia's publicly confirmed Iskander systems in Kaliningrad. A full brigade, 12 TLs, with simultaneous firing and field reloading. That threat arc was already serious. Then 2022 happened. It got much worse. Before invading Ukraine in February 2022, Russia deployed Iskanders to Belarus. One threat vector from the north suddenly became two. Now, NATO's eastern flank gets wrapped in a pincer. Kaliningrad from the north, Belarus from the south. Ukraine didn't just create a conflict, it doubled the threat arc. This isn't just doubling targets, it breaks any defense system that calculates origin to position interceptors. Defenses optimized for the north get caught flat-footed by southern strikes. Two vectors force the defense to split across two engagement geometries. From Kaliningrad, within standard range, are NATO bases in Poland, the Baltics, Czech Republic, and much of Germany. Ramstein sits 1,100 kilometers away, technically beyond the old INF treaty limits. But with the 2019 collapse and Belarus deployments, Germany just got pulled into the threat window. Together, the two arcs create nearly unbroken coverage across Eastern and Central Europe, every strategically important NATO base. 75 American installations, 25 countries. Most fall within some Iskander threat window, depending on variant and vector. TEL mobility cuts off the obvious question before you ask it. Why doesn't NATO just strike the launchers first? Two reasons. First, preemptive strikes against Russian or Belarusian territory during peacetime is war not a viable option. Second, TELs are mobile by design. They don't sit around waiting to be hit. A TEL rolls out of base, blends in on regular roads, sets up elsewhere, fires and relocates before any satellite can verify the launch site and transmit targeting data. There's no fixed target to destroy. You've got 12 mobile launchers in Kaliningrad and more in Belarus, scattered across an area too vast for a surgical strike. In practice, this dual arc creates a massive defensive problem. NATO has exactly two systems to handle it. The real question: was either one designed for this? Now let's talk about the defenses. When people think of American missile defense, they picture the Patriot. Decades of development, billions spent. The system that supposedly nailed Scuds over Riyadh in 1991. The frontline defense at NATO bases in Eastern Europe. And that's exactly the vulnerability. The Patriot PAC-3 is highly capable. It was designed for the Scud, predictable trajectory, calculated impact, interceptor on a collision course. That worked. But the Iskander isn't a Scud, and here's why that matters. First problem: altitude. An Iskander's apogee, its highest point, sits between 50 and 100 kilometers. The Patriot PAC-3's ceiling is roughly 24 kilometers. Throughout the mid-course phase, when the Iskander cruises at 60-80 kilometers in full ballistic flight, the Patriot can't reach it. Mid-course interception, when trajectories are easiest to predict, is literally impossible. The interceptor just can't get that high. The only window left is the terminal phase, the final seconds before impact. And that's exactly when the Iskander was engineered to be hardest to hit. In terminal phase, the final 20 to 40 seconds, the Iskander pulls those evasive maneuvers we covered. G-loads the Patriot PAC-3, built for much slower targets, can't match. Terminal collision math breaks down when the target changes direction faster than the interceptor can recalculate and respond. That's physics. No patch fixes physics. Second problem: the time window. Patriot radar's reliable detection range against the Iskander's quasi-ballistic trajectory is limited by radar horizon and geometry. Fire from Kaliningrad at the Baltics? The warning window from detection to impact can be under 60 seconds. The full Patriot cycle detection, ID, firing decision, launch, guidance, interception, takes longer than that. When you've got that tight a window and a maneuvering target, the system can't close the loop in time. Third problem: saturation. An Iskander brigade operates 12 TLs. Each carries 2 missiles. With field reloading, a single brigade can launch dozens in one op. A Patriot battery has a strictly limited engagement capacity. Multiple Iskanders arriving simultaneously or rapid fire at nearby targets saturates the defense. Not because single interceptions are impossible, but because the sheer volume of simultaneous threats overwhelms the system's engagement rate. And the economics don't help the defender. An Iskander costs $3.7 million. A Patriot PAC-3 interceptor costs $4.6 million. Cost parity means for every Iskander Russia fires, NATO spends just as much or more trying to stop it. Plus, you need nearly 100% success. A 70% success rate? 30% still hit their targets. That's not adequate defense for a critical command center. Real combat performance tells the story. Since 2022, Ukraine's shown the Patriot has hits and misses against Russian ballistics. It's capable under certain conditions, but against the Iskander, the interception consistency, with its quasi-ballistic trajectory and terminal maneuvers, hasn't reached the reliability needed for high-value strategic targets. And to protect Ramstein, you don't need 70% success. Not 80%. Not 90%. You need nearly 100% to guarantee command and control survives. Right now, no defense system on Earth delivers that against the Iskander. But NATO has two systems. What about the second one? In 2016, NATO turned on Aegis ashore in Deveselu, Romania. SPY-1 radar, SM-3 Block 2IA interceptors touted as the alliance's second missile defense layer in Europe. To understand why it fails against the Iskander, you need to know what it was actually built for. Aegis ashore in Deveselu wasn't built for the Iskander. It was built for long-range threats, specifically hypothetical Iranian ICBMs aimed at Western Europe or the US passing over Europe, a missile launching from Iran, climbing into the stratosphere, descending in a smooth, predictable arc. That's its baseline threat, an ICBM on a standard trajectory. That's completely different geometry from the Iskander. The SM-3 Block 2IA was built to engage targets at much higher altitudes with ICBM approach geometries. Against an Iskander firing from Kaliningrad or Belarus at Germany, the engagement geometry from Deveselu is terrible. Angle of approach, available altitude, time window, none of it fits this system's envelope. In practical terms, Aegis ashore in Deveselu is looking the wrong direction for the right threat. Politics complicates everything. When NATO unveiled Aegis ashore in Deveselu, the US said it posed no threat to Russia's nuclear deterrent. They claimed it was strictly anti-Iranian. SM-3 interceptors couldn't touch Russian ICBMs. Russia didn't buy it. They explicitly said deploying Iskanders to Kaliningrad was, in part, their symmetrical response to NATO's shield. So NATO has two systems, Patriot and Aegis ashore. Neither was architected for the Iskander, one designed for Scuds, not 30G maneuvers. The other built for Iranian ICBMs, not quasi-ballistic SRBMs from Kaliningrad. THAAD terminal high-altitude area defense has the right engagement geometry for some phases of Iskander flight. It's not permanently deployed in Europe. Temporary deployments happen for exercises. But permanent coverage of strategically important bases doesn't exist. The defense gap isn't theoretical, it's structural. And it has a name. Indefensible doesn't mean the Iskander reaches top speed uncontested. It means something more precise, more disturbing. In military doctrine, indefensible doesn't mean zero interception probability. It means insufficient reliability to guarantee command and control survives. That's the heart of it. The Patriot might intercept some Iskanders under ideal conditions: single missile, clean trajectory, no extreme maneuvers, early warning, full engagement cycle. But the reliability isn't high enough for a NATO commander to say with conviction, Ramstein survives the first salvo. And Ramstein isn't just a base, it's the Air Operations Center, the AOC coordinating all NATO air ops in Europe, the Alliance's military communications nerve center, where critical air command decisions get made in real time, where logistical response to European crises gets coordinated. If Ramstein gets destroyed in the first minutes, NATO loses air coordination across Europe. Not temporarily. Restoring this function at unprepared backup facilities could determine whether a crisis escalates or settles. Planners call this a soft kill. You don't need to destroy all NATO forces. You destroy coordination, the thing that makes forces function as a cohesive alliance. You've got the Army, Air Force, Navy. Without the nerve center coordinating them? Isolated units, not an integrated response. Physical vulnerabilities make it worse. Most U.S. bases in Europe are Cold War era, built when the main threat was land invasion. No hardening against precision ballistics with 5-meter accuracy. Bunkers exist, but they protect personnel against area bombing, not direct hits, from bunker-penetrating warheads at exact coordinates on an operations center. Combat in Ukraine since 2022 provides validation no theory could. NATO has watched the Iskander M in real combat. Strikes on command centers, airfields, logistics, hardened structures. Real-world precision matches stated specs. Penetrating warhead strikes on hardened structures produce results matching what had happened against NATO facilities. Military analysts reached a conclusion. The probability a coordinated Iskander attack destroys the AOC at Ramstein is high enough that the defense isn't reliable. That's the operational definition of indefensible, which raises the obvious question. If that's the diagnosis, why hasn't it been fixed? There's a technical fix to the Iskander problem. It isn't simple, it isn't cheap, and it isn't being implemented. Step 1. Permanent THAAD deployment in Europe. THAAD has the right engagement geometry for the Iskander, especially where Patriot falls short. Permanent deployment at strategic Eastern European locations, integrated with Patriot and Aegis in truly complementary layers. This doesn't exist now. Beyond THAAD, significantly more Patriot batteries across Europe, physical hardening or dispersing high-value facilities, satellite early warning systems with latency low enough to widen response windows, and pre-delegated launch authority, so decision cycles don't require human confirmation when seconds count. Estimated cost? Tens of billions. Not a single budget cycle. A decade-long commitment. Why hasn't it happened? Multiple reasons, all reinforcing. First, politics. Expanding missile defense in Europe requires host nation negotiations. Several European NATO members resist it. Simple reason. Russia's repeatedly said expansion of the shield gets a symmetrical offensive response. The political math is hard. Deploy defenses, Russia responds, internal tension rises, national risk perception increases, diplomatic and trade relations tighten. Second, the INF Treaty's doctrinal legacy. For decades, that treaty banned medium-range missiles in Europe for both sides. Defense systems built in that era were calibrated for threats beyond that range. Doctrinal thinking took too long to recalibrate when it collapsed in 2019, and procurement machinery is slow even when thinking shifts. Third, economics and alliance politics. NATO's burden-sharing disputes. The never-ending argument about who pays how much create paralysis right when coordinated investments matter most. One country couldn't solve this alone. The problem is coordinating large-scale investments that benefit everyone, but require specific contributions. The cost asymmetry dramatically favors Russia. Here's what analysts rarely say clearly. Russia solved the problem cheap. The Iskander M program, deployments in Kaliningrad and Belarus, Western Military District Brigade upgrades, they cost a fraction of NATO's defensive response. Russia spent billions creating the problem. NATO needs tens of billions countering it defensively. Analysts hate articulating this asymmetry because it shows Russia played the long game better than NATO planners. NATO's latest moves are offensive, not defensive. The 2024 American announcement of land-based long-range missiles in Europe, including ATACMS capabilities, major strategic move. Offensive deterrence, but it doesn't fix the defensive gap. It says, if you fire, we fire too. It doesn't say, if you fire, your missiles won't reach their targets. That brings us to the final puzzle. What's the actual plan? NATO does have an answer to the Iskander. It's not interception, it's deterrence. The logic: Russia knows any Iskander strike against NATO bases triggers a response costing more than any first salvo advantage. A catastrophic response replaces the need for reliable interception. I don't need to stop your missile if firing it is the beginning of the end. To understand why this is less comforting than it sounds, you need to know Russian doctrine. Escalate to de-escalate. Russia didn't design the Iskander for all-out war. They designed it as a weapon of limited coercion. Escalate to de-escalate has dominated Russian strategic thinking for decades. The idea: use limited precision strikes to paralyze the adversary's response capability and create a fait accompli situation on the ground, forcing a binary choice: escalate to total war, or accept the new reality. The Iskander is this doctrine's primary instrument. Here's how it plays out. Eastern flank crisis. Russia advancing on something it considers strategically critical. A salvo of Iskanders hits the AOC at Ramstein, key comm facilities in Poland, and dual-use airfields in the Baltics. The message isn't, we've destroyed NATO. It's, we've shown NATO can't stop us. Next step is full escalation at an unacceptable cost for both sides. Or you back down now. The nuclear variant gets darker. The 1050 kiloton yield warhead isn't a last resort weapon in E2DE. It's calibrated coercion. A low-yield tactical nuke creates dramatic, irreversible impact without crossing the strategic escalation threshold that'd require an American nuclear response. Conventional versus nuclear Iskanders look identical from outside. Same launcher, same trajectory. This puts NATO's Article 5 in an uncomfortable position the alliance rarely states frankly. Article 5 responds to attackers advancing onto Allied territory. Coercion by precision strike, where Russia destroys facilities without occupying territory. Article 5's application gets murky. Is it a crisis? An act of war? An incident requiring investigation? Consensus needed among 32 members. And if command and control gets degraded in the first minutes, the ability to coordinate a response is exactly what was targeted. E2DE exploits this ambiguity perfectly. The attack's devastating enough to matter, small enough to avoid automatic full-scale escalation response, and 200 seconds between launch and impact leaves no time for political debate. The inability to defend American bases in Europe against the Iskander isn't a bug. It's a predictable consequence of decades of architectural, political, and doctrinal choices, prioritizing deterrence over defense. Choices that assumed no rational adversary would use this weapon. That built infrastructure for a different era and failed to adapt when the threat evolved over 20 years. The final question has no easy answer. NATO planners know it. Is deterrence credible when the other side calculates your interception rate and sees the probability of a successful first strike is high? That's the question those 200 seconds pose every time an Iskander launches from Kaliningrad. Want to understand how this same logic plays out in the Pacific? The next video on the Chinese DF-17 is already on the channel.